Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northern Nevada. Come up, come up, come up. I'm going to get our small group here into a cluster. Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northern Nevada, aka UUFNN, where it is our mission to grow together in love, faith, justice, and joy. We here at UUFNN are growing in numbers and in our faith that by being and working together, we can help bring about justice for all and build a more compassionate community. It is a joy to see you all in person this morning or on Zoom, virtually, for this time of reflection and introspection. We welcome all to be part of us, regardless of racial identity, ethnic background, age, economic circumstances, educational achievement, judicial history, immigration status, sexual orientation, or gender identity. UUFNN is about compassion and support, not judgment. I'm Bill Miller. Personal pronouns, he, him, his. It is my pleasure to serve as your worship associate this morning for our Right Relationship service led by our own Billie Lee Dunford-Jackson. If this is your first time visiting us, welcome. We're glad to have you join us. If you're online, feel free to contact the office or our website for more information. You can also click on a link in the chat box to fill out the newcomers form and sign up for our newsletter that will keep you informed of all the many activities here at UUFNN. If you're here in person, please see one of us to help you get to someone who can give you that information. Regrettably, COVID lingers and is threatening yet another comeback. While we have currently lifted all restrictions, please honor those who choose to mask and observe social distancing. It's not over. For those joining us on Zoom, please note that you can update your name on screen so we can know who you are. You will remain muted during the service and can use the chat box for comments, primarily during prayer and meditation sessions. As a courtesy, please refrain from posting announcements while folks are presenting. Your moms would not approve. Following the service, please stay on for a virtual coffee hour where we break into small groups to chat face-to-face. If you're here in person, you can congregate outdoors for coffee, if we've made any. Did we make any coffee this morning? Well, virtual coffee and conversation. Again, I'm Bill Miller, your worship associate for today's service. Let's get started. For 2 years, I still haven't figured out how to take my mask off without hooking my glasses. Thank you, Bill. So, our call to worship. First up, which in you can mean whatever you want it to mean. Here in the Great Hall, falling on your knees and praising the heavens is optional. For me, our call to worship means slipping out of Chronos time, TikTok, chaos time, into Kairos time, or the eternal present moment. I have a poem I wrote about that very thing you might enjoy. If you don't, I will be mercifully short. Time is hanging on the wall, pacing up and down the hall, ever present, everywhere. Even when I'm gone, it's there. Or more profoundly, if still more somewhat whimsical, Bill, would you like to do this? A little verse from Rumi. We just make this up. We make this up as we go along. I've got it right here.
Out beyond all notions of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
That Rumi. Yes, let us meet there and begin our service. First up, a chalice lighting light is still lit. Chalice lighting is somewhat unique to UU. Oh. I borrowed this wonderful explanation from Elizabeth Harding that I'll read as Billie Lee lights our chalice, as those of you at home on Zoom light yours. Jeff, come forward. We are meeting in front today. We Unitarian Universalists don't drink from our chalice. Instead, we use it to hold the flame. The circle of the chalice helps keep the fire small. The flame doesn't blind us. It doesn't burn us. It gives us light, so we can see the different things in the universe, even the invisible ones. Because the Unitarian Universalist flame is a light of learning. The flaming chalice is a symbol of learning and of love. It is our symbol, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Music?
Some weeks ago, I stood in the spot and spoke with you about the importance for all people, and most especially for Unitarian Universalists, of engaging in nurturing relationships. I pointed out that by growing together in love, faith, justice, and joy, that is, by definition, a cooperative effort. And I reminded you of the frequent exhortations we hear from this pulpit, reminders that we're better together, that we can do together what we can't do alone. In this fellowship, as you all are familiar with, we hear a steady drumbeat expressed in a variety of ways, but carrying the unchanging message that we need each other. We cannot live as fully actualized human beings without our relationships with one another. And that message set a tone, set a topic that we are probably going to continue to return to from time to time in coming weeks and months and maybe even years, as we examine, well, what that means and how we can do that. Some maybe practical things we can try to think about, and one of those is today. Since the time I last stood here, we've adopted our covenant. Finally, as typical with UUs, it took a while. Let's listen again, very briefly, to the things we promised each other. And this time, as we go through these, think about how the things we have committed to make it even more essential that we engage in right relationships, because we can't possibly do these things by ourselves. So here's our covenant. We aspire to build a democratic community that is based on trust, transparency, and open communion. We aspire to be present in the moment and listen to each other with honesty and compassion. We aspire to be good examples to our children in their lifelong journey of discovery and meaning. We aspire to respect individual lifestyles in an accepting atmosphere of love. We aspire to stand against racism and nurture a culture within UUFNN that is welcoming and safe for everyone. We aspire to be mindful of our own biases and show consideration for others in our words and actions. We aspire to affirm and practice the UU principles in our daily lives. We aspire to stay informed about our fellowship and be reliable stewards to ensure that we continue to grow in love, faith, justice, and joy. We aspire to honor all expressions of spirituality, and we aspire to create and nourish a balance between spirituality and social justice. The foundation of these aspirations is the sure knowledge that we have chosen, all of us have chosen, to be in this together. It follows that the only way we have a hope of keeping our promises to each other is to enter into and tend lovingly our relationships with each other. Relationships that allow us to be together in a community that is based on trust, transparency, and open communication, and that allows us to listen to each other with honesty and compassion, that allows us to be mindful of our own biases and show consideration for others in our words and actions. It's a little like keeping your car tuned up, except that keeping our relationships in tune requires constant rather than periodic attention. On the other hand, it's much more fun and rewarding than trips to the dealer. So where do we begin? Well, as a first step, there are two things, it seems to me, that we need to practice and acquire. And the first is a willingness to become transparent, a willingness to be vulnerable. an ability to manage ourselves and our emotions and our expectations so that we can approach each situation open and honestly. And the second thing is that we know each other deeply, not superficially. We cannot love someone whom we don't really know, at least not at the deepest level as an individual. And without love, there's no possibility of right relationship. Of course, all of this is more easily said than done, right? Yeah. Where do we even start? Well, let's take an example of Jeanette. Jeanette, a long-time employee with her company, likes to say that she knows where the bodies are buried. She's intelligent, she's diligent, she carries her weight on the job. She's just been assigned a new boss, a lot younger than she, a young man, a young, attractive man. In Jeanette's experience, and in her way of looking at things, people like she is do the work, and people like he is get the glory. She feels underappreciated anyway. And so, of course, she carries this attitude with her as she prepares for the first time to meet with her new boss. He arranges to meet individually with each one of the senior staffers, including Jeanette, and sets his meeting with her for 1 o'clock several days hence. So Jeanette spends some time thinking about that meeting and trying to figure out how it's probably going to go. And on the day of the meeting, she's there at the appointed time, at the appointed place, and the boss doesn't show up. And the boss doesn't call. Jeanette assumes that something came up that he considers more pressing than meeting with her. And how does she feel? Well, how would you expect her to feel? Resentful, right? What Jeanette doesn't know, at least for a little longer, is that her boss on the way to the meeting witnessed an automobile accident, and he had to stay at the scene to be interviewed by the police. And to his disgust, he found when he tried to call that his phone was out of juice. So how do you suppose Jeanette felt when she learned the truth? Think about how that must have been for her. What impact do you suppose these circumstances had on the start of the relationship between her and her new boss? It certainly didn't help things, did it? This human tendency to fill in the gaps in our knowledge with assumptions based on what's happened to us in the past, what we've been taught as we grew up, has in this case made a touchy situation just that much worse. Jeanette is bound to feel a little foolish now and a little awkward, sort of on the back foot with her new boss. And she and her new boss will have to start from a little bit more difficult place to build a healthy working relationship. Wasted time, wasted emotion. Why is it, do you suppose, that we seem to be hardwired to do this, to make these assumptions? Children don't do that. Shoot, they ask unabashedly. They ask questions all the time. But by the time we reach adulthood, it seems we have all developed a perspective of life already that colors everything that our senses are bringing into us now. It's a filter that we see and perceive from, and each of us carries it with us all the time, and each of them is unique to us. Identifying our unique perspective can be challenging. It's pretty hard to step out yourself and look and see yourself objectively and figure out what it is that you don't know. That's very difficult to do. And to realize that not everybody shares our view of life. We need to work to try to identify our general attitudes and the prejudices that frame how we interpret the information that's coming into us. The same information may be coming into everybody in the room, but the perception is liable to be quite different among all those people gathered there together. We need to school ourselves to wait, to listen, to ask for more information rather than filling in the gaps with assumptions that cause us to leap all too often to inaccurate conclusions. Think back, those of you who are old enough, and there are a few of us in the room that are, to the 1968 presidential campaign when the Democrats held their convention in Chicago. Massive demonstrations figured large during that convention in protest of our deepening involvement in Vietnam. The police engaged in many strategies to effect crowd control. It was common to see videotapes on the nightly news of violent clashes between law enforcement and demonstrators, where many people all watching the same video, while many people saw hordes of unwashed, ungroomed, upstart kids daring to challenge authority, others watching the identical scenes saw pretty appalling police brutality. Or consider the stories we've all read in the paper or seen on TV of the homeowner who's sure that the person knocking on their door late at night means to hurt or rob them, shoots what they think is in defense of home and safety, only to learn that the person lying on the porch in a pool of blood actually just wanted to call a tow truck for a disabled vehicle, and would probably have gotten the homeowner's assistance if under the exact same circumstances had been a member of the same race as the homeowner. As adults, we see what our past learning, experience, and training have taught us to see. And we fall into the same trap as did Jeanette and the observers of the 1968 Democratic Convention and the homeowner with a dead body on the porch. It's never going to make the situation better. It wasn't tragic in Jeanette's case, it just wasn't helpful. But it can be tragic. How can we get ourselves outside ourselves? How can we clear out all the stuff our past has pre-wired us to misperceive and get ourselves to a place where we are ready for the kinds of relationships we all have acknowledged by now that we need? How can we stop making assumptions and leaping to conclusions? I need to know this as much as you do. We all need to learn about it. But for one thing, we can teach ourselves to listen, really listen to others, and not sit there waiting for them to take a breath so we can finally have our turn to talk, not waiting for the chance to respond to something we heard them say that triggered something in us that made us think of something we want to say, and now we're just sitting there waiting for our turn, thinking about what we want to say, not listening to what's happening. What we need to do is to listen carefully to them until it is clear that they have finished telling us what they were trying to tell us. And to become the kind of listener getting outside ourselves requires, it's helpful, it seems to me, if we cultivate an attitude of curiosity. We need to become aware. It's not enough just to hear what the person, what's happened to them, what they're wanting to share, what they believe, but we need to understand why. What got them to that point? What is it about their life experience that has given them the view they're expressing to us? Not just the what, but the why. What are that person's priorities? What are their values? What experiences have been formative for them? Here's where relationships are really born. Here's where both sides become comfortable, not only telling the stories of what they've experienced, but sharing as well what they've learned from those experiences, the lessons that they have adopted as part of their personal belief system that form the principles by which they live. Here's where people become more than just entertainers for each other, telling stories. Here's where they're explored together to learn where their values and principles agree and where they don't, and how they can learn from each other. Here's where they validate each other. And here's where we learn to love each other. So why is it so hard? How can we really hear or by other means learn about the person we're curious about? The most obvious method, assuming we share a common language, is through words. Under those conditions, it might seem that clear communication, allowing us to achieve complete understanding, would be easy. So how is it that we manage so often to shoot ourselves in the foot? Well, let's go back and visit Jeanette. We fall into pitfall 1, Jeanette's trap. Like she did, we allow what happened in the past to shape how we interpret and experience our present. And like Jeanette, because of these blinders, we often misread and misinterpret what is staring us in the face. If instead we practice withholding judgment and avoid jumping to conclusions based on incomplete information, we might be able to break through the shell we've built around ourselves. We might be able to start feeling comfortable listening carefully and really listening, and then asking questions to learn more and gathering a clearer understanding of the true situation before we respond. Let's practice. David is coming forward to provide you with a little piece of paper, just a little piece of paper, and a pencil. And you can hang on to the paper when this is over. We are going to ask you to turn in your pencils as you leave. He's going to have a basket out there by the door that you can put them in. And folks on Zoom, would you please also have handy something to write with and something to write on? Okay. Now let's talk about your task. I'd like you to assume today that you are in a social setting with a number of people you are just starting to get to know. So far, you really like what you see, you like the feeling that you get from this group, and you'd like to develop a deeper relationship with the people in the group. At the outset of this particular conversation, one of the members of the group exclaims, "Boy, what a day." Using your pencil and paper, write your conversational response to this comment. Okay, now I'm going to go over with you a few possible responses. And what I'd like you to do is, as we go through this exercise, think about how your answer is like or unlike, measures up to or doesn't, or exceeds or doesn't these examples. And then at the end of the exercise, I'm going to ask you to look at your answer again and see if you'd like to change it. Okay, so remember the stimulus from the original speaker was, "Boy, what a day." First responder says, wasn't it? The weather was perfect. I just love this time of year. Well, that might seem at first like a nice, friendly response, but think about the assumptions the speaker made. First, the speaker made the assumption, or the respondent made the assumption, that the speaker had had a good day. Is that necessarily true? No. So that leaves, if the original speaker had had a bad day and was saying, will this day ever be over? Boy, what a day. When the response is, wasn't it? Boy, I had a great day today. It's not going to be a killer for the conversation, but it does mean there's a disconnect. The speaker feels like I'm not being heard. This is not somebody who's really tuned into me. We might have some work to do. Okay. Second speaker says, or the second respondent, I'm going to try to call them speaker and respondent so we can keep straight who's who. I should have given them names. Okay, let's say Jake was the first guy. Okay, so the second respondent to Jake says, you aren't kidding. Someone backed into my car in the grocery store parking lot today. That doesn't say anything else. All right? Now think about this as from the perspective of somebody who's trying to build a relationship. What effect is this? It's almost the opposite of the first respondent. This time, the respondent is assuming that Jake had a bad day. What a day. But what the main thing is, it sounds to me like anyway, that the second responder had a rough day himself and is not going to be so interested in hearing about what Jake had go on as wanting to tell his own story. He hijacked the conversation. How do you think that's going to work if what's really going on here is an attempt to draw Jake out, to get to know him, to get to learn about his life experiences and what his beliefs are? You're not going to get very far if you hijack the conversation, are you? Okay, let's see how number 3 does. Third respondent says, remember the stimulus was, what a day. Yes, it was. I read outside on the patio. What did you do? Well, it seems to me, getting better. There is still the assumption it was a pleasant day for Jake, but there is some sharing and then an invitation to Jake. What did you do? And I guess from that you could get to, and what did that mean to you? So that's getting better, going in the right direction. Let's see how number 4 did. Well, I had a great day, but I can't tell from your comment how your day was. What happened in your world today that made it exceptionally good or bad for you? Now, what's the difference here? Our respondent is staying focused on Jake and not injecting self into it at all, wanting to know what went on with you today. And from there, it's a pretty easy leap, I would assume, to the kinds of questions that would get to, and what did that mean to you? Why was that important to you? You sound like it was a pretty bad experience. What's really going on? So it feels to me like this fourth respondent stayed focused, went into the group, remember, thinking, I really want to develop some deep relationships with this group. Stayed focused on that, listened, asked questions to get more information. So that would be, to me, the ticket. That if that's what we're focusing on, then we need to avoid what all too often we usually do, which is measure the original ambiguous comment against our own experience, make assumptions about the experience of Jake, and allow our assumptions to shape our response, rather than experiencing the curiosity about the original speaker and about what Jake was trying to impart, and then asking questions to learn more. I'd say respondent number 4 pretty much nailed it. So why don't you take just a second now and review your original response. I'm not going to ask anybody to disclose anything, but just look at it and see if you think, in view of this conversation, you might have made a little bit different response. You can keep that for yourself. What are some of the other pitfalls we fall into? Well, some of us listen to part of what the person says, assume that we have the whole picture, and get real busy in our minds composing the response we think is relevant rather than hearing the rest of the story. For example, let's say you know that Horace, a person of your acquaintance and also of some local notoriety, is also a longtime stamp collector with a national reputation for his fancy cancellation collection. Incidentally, as the longtime spouse of a longtime stamp collector, I know that a fancy cancellation collection is a real thing. You know this because your spouse is a stamp collector as well and belongs to the same stamp club as does Horace. Now, somebody you're just getting to know, and you know now from your spouse, has recently joined the stamp club, expresses to you excitement that Horace has bought the house right next door. And you respond, well, yeah, I guess you are excited. You'll probably get to tour his stamp room and see his entire collection. Thinking to yourself, boy, my spouse would be in heaven if that happened. Well, the new friend responds, well, maybe, and that'd be nice. But what I mean is, he's a great soccer coach, and my son is the perfect age to start working with him. I think with us living right next door, we have a real good shot at that. Now, admittedly, this is not a fatal mistake. This is not a dead body laying on your porch. But it does create an awkward pause, perhaps creates a bit of a question in the mind of the new person about your listening skills. For sure, it calls for additional work on building a comfortable relationship. For sure, there's been a failure to really hear the person out, to ask questions for information after you've heard everything they want to say. And another pitfall is a little twist on the same situation. We allow ourselves to be blocked by our own perspective. Let's say that two people serve on a committee, and they're preparing to welcome a newcomer to their group. One of them, they don't either one know very much about the newcomer, but one of them knows that the newcomer has some political views that might cause them to find some of the group's goals to be problematic. There could be a rough spot ahead. The other knows that the newcomer has recently been injured and restricted to a wheelchair for a while, and knows that the meeting room is not ADA approved. So they begin their conversation concerning their expectations and reservations about the first meeting the newcomer will attend. Unless both of these people are really good at listening, this conversation is fraught with opportunities to go off the rails. Miscommunication, awkwardness, even embarrassment could well be the result of this conversation. So to recap, what we're going for here, when you're engaged in a conversation with someone new who you really think has possibilities for a deep relationship, a right relationship, listen deeply, paying attention to every word until you're sure you've heard everything the speaker wants to say. Have you, like I have, had the experience of being in a room and you're talking to somebody like this, a newcomer, somebody you really like, would like to get to know? That's Henry. Marcy's moving him away. He won't disrupt us for long. So you're talking to this person, and the whole time you're talking to them, they're looking over your shoulder. They're looking all around to see who's coming in, and they're sort of saying, uh-huh, to what you're saying, but you feel like pretty much everybody's more important than you are in this conversation. On the other hand, you know people, probably a few people, all too few, who seem to have a talent for making you feel when you're talking with them, there's nobody else in the world. You're the most interesting person they've ever met. And that feeling you get, you know how it draws you in? You just want to talk to them. That's really what we're going for here. So here are the steps. You listen. I can tell you this. I don't practice it nearly like I wish I did. Listen deeply, paying attention to every word until you're sure you've heard everything the speaker wants or intends to say. And then let your curiosity kick in. Turn on your curiosity button. You're trying to find out not just the what, but also the why. What about what you've just heard? What did that mean to the speaker? Why was it important? Why is he engaged in this in his mind and willing to share it? What life experiences have shaped the speaker's view? And with that, armed with that curiosity, ask questions. Try to get the speaker to go deeper. Now, why are we so hesitant to do this? To listen deeply until we hear where the other person's coming from and then start asking questions. Well, maybe we don't want to come across as nosy. Maybe we don't want to appear culturally inappropriate. Maybe we want to control the conversation in order to perpetuate some image we hope we're putting out there. Or to hide an insecurity that we're afraid might come out if everybody gets real candid with each other. But any one of these concerns is pretty much guaranteed to inhibit, even to prevent, the development of the kind of communication essential to building right relationships, which is why I said at the beginning that one of the things we need to be able to do is to stop trying to hide, to be willing to be transparent, to be willing to be vulnerable. Now, luckily, there are communication techniques, verbal and nonverbal, that allow us to demonstrate a genuine interest in and curiosity about the person we're trying to get to know. And you've heard these. There's nothing new here. We've all heard them more than once. But all too often, we're too busy falling into all these pitfalls I was talking about earlier to be able to really make deliberate choices at the moment to use these techniques, to take advantage of them. So let's focus on them now and consider how they help us get across that message that we are really interested in hearing what the other person had to say and in understanding what in their past experience has shaped views we're trying to learn about. Active listening, which can mean a whole bunch of things. Making appropriate responsive sounds like, uh-huh, and oh, really? You know, just being in it. Giving reflective feedback like that. Nodding. Leaning forward into the conversation. Lasering in with your eyes. Don't do the eye-wandering thing that we talked about a few minutes ago that makes people feel like they're sort of just extraneous to the conversation. Reflect back. I thought I heard you say da-da-da. Is that what did you mean by that? Ask for clarification. Find a way to establish common interests so that each of you is motivated to get closer, feels comfortable revealing more. Once the speaker understands from being in a conversation for you and based on your skillful use of these techniques and becomes confident that you really are interested in them and dedicated to hearing their story, you probably won't need to fear that they will hesitate to talk to you. They'll be like I mentioned a few minutes ago. They'll want to talk to you forever. because they will really feel your interest, and we all want to feel like we're irresistible, right? So if you make them feel that way, I think you got them hooked. Think you'll be able to feel that the walls will go down, trust will build, and the level of disclosure will go deeper. One final caveat, though. Avoid the temptation to rush the process. We're in the business of building relationships, not checking off agenda items. Getting people to disclose what they think is generally pretty easy and pretty quickly accomplished, but getting them to go deeper and to begin to reveal the forces that have shaped them so that they view things the way they do now, getting to the why, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes trust building. Anything short of that, though, is going to produce a superficial acquaintance rather than a right relationship. And we can't build our community on superficial acquaintances. Anything short of real relationships prevents our building together a community based on trust, transparency, and open communication. Prevents our listening to each other with honesty and compassion. Prevents our being mindful of our own biases and showing consideration for others in words and actions. Anything short of that halts our relation building at the superficial level and keeps us from establishing the foundation of the very right relationships that support our whole purpose of coming together in this fellowship to start with. Today's takeaway: there is no shortcut to connecting at the heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Billie Lee. We're going to do a move from that into a Native American chant, been transliterated. And if you're willing to join me, it's very simple. While Bill's getting set up. And the first part is, may we walk in beauty, may we walk in peace, may we walk in beauty, may we walk in peace, and the bridge is all our relations, all our relations. Got it? Let's try it again. May we walk in beauty, may we walk in peace, may we walk in beauty, may we walk in peace, all our relations, all our relations. Good. Now there's a second part. All life is sacred, the animals and the trees. All life is sacred, the oceans and the seas. All our relations, all our relations. Now, that's very nice. Now, you may have noticed this is a native chant. And, I mean, if you haven't been to, powwow, at least you've seen natives in movies. And, they'll have teepees in a circle, and they'll have a little campfire. But the thing that you never see with Native Americans is chairs. They don't do chairs. They live in their bodies and they move. So this is going to be, it's a big ask. Big ask. But those who are willing and able to stand are welcome to stand. Yes. And use your body. So, may we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. Now, this is tricky. You're going to have to turn. Oh, thank you. All relations. And then the other way. All relations. I know, it's as if there's more to your body than your head. All right, so here we go. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. All our relations. All our relations. Yeah. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. May we walk in beauty. May we walk in peace. All our relations. All our relations. All life is sacred, the animals and the trees. All life is sacred, the mountains and the seas. All our relations. All our relations. Now let's step it up a little bit. All life is sacred, the animals and the trees. All life is sacred, the mountains and the seas. All our relations. All our relations. All our relations. All our relations. Yeah. Oops, no, this stays. Well, I hope that was fun for you. It's fun for me. Okay, offering. All right, kids, there's no free lunch. No free service. It's that time again. Time to share our bounty to help keep the lights on, cameras rolling, and the work of this congregation going. For those of you here in person, we'll be passing the basket. If you're following virtually, please text 73256, that's 73256. Type in UUFNN in the message box, hit send. You can also mail a check to the office at 780 Del Monte Lane, 89511. Today's Share the Plate recipient is Wild West Access Fund of Nevada, whose goal is to create a resource for Nevadans in need of abortion care and support. WWAF is an all-volunteer-run group, so all donations, every penny, goes directly to helping people in need. Now let the offering begin. Ha! Well, we shake you down, but we play happy music while we do it. Now let us join together in our gesture of hope and connection. One hand on your heart, the other reaching out in connection. And repeat. To the work of this fellowship, which is helping more people grow in love, faith, justice, and joy, we dedicate ourselves, and these are offerings. Thank you. Now is the time in our service for offering up your prayers and concerns in silent contemplation. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can enter them in the chat box. Thank you for your silent offerings and sharings. Let us join together again in our gesture of hope and connection. One hand on the heart, the other reaching out as we bless these concerns with Bill reading a poem from Khalil Gibran.
Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone. Even as the strings of the lute are alone, though they quiver with the very same music.
Thank you, Bill. And thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, you can learn more about connecting with UUFNN here on the slide. If this is your second or third time with us, sorry, you're on your own. Just kidding. Ask anybody. This is a congregation of gifted teachers and conversationalists. To receive our weekly email and other updates from UUFNN, click on the link for our contact card in the middle of the page. If you need help with Zoom or other support or know of someone who does, or know of anyone feeling isolated who may need connection and support, contact Carol Sorensen at the office at uufnn.org. After the service ends, please stay online to join our informal virtual coffee hour. You'll see an invitation appear on your screen to join a breakout room. If during coffee hour you need help, support, or questions answered, please press the help button, those of you on Zoom, in your breakout room. If you are still here, feel free to linger. Hang out, take a walk in the Memorial Garden. The garden group is keeping spotless for you. And just enjoy the day. But first, let's all enjoy the closing song led by Bill Quimby and friends. Oh, thank you all for coming out or tuning in. Let us now end our time together once again with our gesture, one hand on the heart, the other reaching out in connection, in community, as Bill Quimby reads our closing benediction from Rumi.
In our gathering, one candle lights hundreds. We will light your path and give you courage so you will open like a flower and join in our joyous laughter. Plant the seeds and watch it grow. When it spreads its branches, come with us and sit under the blossoms. Your eyes will open to the secret of truth.
Thank you, Bill. Blessed be. Amen. La ilaha illa Allah. Om mani padme hum. Namaste. Good day.